Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Womanhood Wisdom Wednesday, our Tribe Talks. And I'm excited, of course, to share with you as we approach Father's Day. How about that? As we approach Father's Day, I'm excited to share with you a couple of introductory concepts for women who are still working through their daddy issues. I know that this is a challenging subject for some women, just like the Mother's Day can be. I have a special sweet spot in this area because I actually had the opportunity to heal my own daddy issues. And I want to share with you just some introductory concepts because I know that sometimes we dismiss it. It's easy to dismiss it. And I probably should move the camera over so that I'm not looking in two cameras. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm talking to IG and Facebook today. And I am LaTanya Taylor, affectionately known as the Rev Coach, the Juicy Spirit Mama, the Priestess of Purpose, Pleasure, and Passion, honey. And so you can't have any of those things fully. I'm going to move this camera over. You can't really fully have those things when you are feeling like you have a hole in your heart the size of daddy, as Yanla says. Some of you, I hope you all are watching the show as well, and watching our work be done, transformation on TV. And so I'm just taking a moment to invite a few people here, and I'm going to jump right in because what I'm going to share, if you see me looking back, it's because I'm looking back at my baby dog. A few years ago, I wrote in this book of inspiration called Pearls of Wisdom for living a richer life, for pearls of wisdom for living a richer life. And I want to read a little excerpt for you from this particular entry that I wrote because it will set the tone for our conversation today. And I do want you to talk back to me because every woman is different. And I'm going to talk about how it's different for every woman, because one of the things that we still do is compare ourselves to other people. And sometimes we compare ourselves even to our own healing journey. So check this out really quickly. The story I wrote this story. My father died in 2005. When I returned, I think I had been invited to write in this series, and I had just gotten back. I actually thought that I could go back to work right after my father died. And this book was due. I was wondering how in the world am I going to write about this? And I was so open. I was so wide open. And so I say that to say to you, I wrote this piece from such a vulnerable place in my heart. And I really believe that any woman who reads it, I know people are probably going to be saying, how can I get the book? But I'm going to try to give you as much as I can from the book, because I actually think that this may be out of print, but there may actually be a way for me to order it because it's something to refer to. And what's so funny is, sometimes you forget the work that you've done, and actually you start to think, okay, well, let me present this expert, that expert, but this is I can speak to this 100% because I saw the evidence of our healing before he passed. And so because of that, I was able to have a clarity in my heart and in my spirit that I want every woman to be able to have in her spirit and in her relationships, particularly with men in her life. Because my question to you is, how can you talk about you want to be in a relationship, you want to have a man, and you're at war to a degree with men. You hate men, some of you, because of this unhealed place, right? And it's not that being you wanting it is a bad thing. It doesn't mean that you are a bad person or that you're incomplete in any way. However, what it does mean is that there is room for growth. That's it. It's room for growth. And it's really just a question of what you're willing to invest in yourself to do the work, because I didn't get here by myself. At this time, I thank God I had Iyanla and others in my life to walk me through. So let me just go on and read this excerpt. If you all are watching, and you can just go on and invite people even as you are watching, so that they'll know that we are on live, so that we can get this word into the hearts and minds of the ladies in our tribe. Because I know I'm looking away from the camera, I understand. But let me say this. Still Daddy's Girl. And this is by, if you have the book, you'll see that at that time I was still going by the name LaTanya Muhammad. And I was so far from the identity of LaTanya Muhammad because I was free. I was free from religious shackles. I was free from so many things that I had dedicated myself to in the name of God. And so I was really at a place of getting to know myself without the weight of religion in my heart or on my shoulders. And so I want to share that with you, because when you see it, it's LaTanya Taylor now. So the opening quote is, "Surrendering my judgments initiated my forgiveness process, which created a bridge to love again. In October 2005, I lost the first man I ever loved to a massive heart attack, my daddy. My first emotion was shock, then disbelief and absolute horror. I had talked to him that Sunday morning, but by early evening, he was gone from the physical experience. To my dismay, it meant he would not get to see me have my first child, write my first book, and launch my coaching career and ministry. Yes, I'm a daddy's girl. From my earliest memory, I loved everything about my father. The way he laughed, I still can hear his laughter. Sometimes I hear people that sound like him. His curly hair, his tall height, the way he walked. I'm ad-libbing a little bit. His slim fingers, I have them. His cooking, his intelligence, his intellect, his no-nonsense strength of character. I loved so much about him, but of course there were parts I didn't like. My mother tells me he took me everywhere with him, and I'd ride by his side. He was proud to call me his ladybird. I was ladybird. The love, though, wasn't so childlike. My relationship with my father represents a journey from childlike adoration to disappointment, pain, fear, unforgiveness, and then forgiveness and unconditional love. You see, when I was in second grade, my father left when he and my mother divorced. When he left her, he left me. So I thought. I was a child, and I couldn't separate the act. The world came undone because he took pieces of me with him. And this was the beginning of my feelings of rejection, abandonment, and low self-worth. I'm going to pause here just to continue to invite you all into the space here, but just to say that, I'm sharing this very intentionally because a lot of times these are emotions and things that as a child that you have that you don't know how to articulate. And sometimes as grown women, we still don't know how to articulate it, no matter how successful we are, how much money we have, and how many boyfriends or girlfriends you've had. The daddy issue can be alive and well. And this does not just apply to the father who was there or not there. Your father can be in the house and still be emotionally unavailable or inaccessible in some way, or totally toxic. And so it's important for us to know this, to make the distinction such that we are able to, and I'm looking away, y'all, so that I can manage both devices. It's important to know. So, sometimes I know that I'm talking to some women who have been divorced. This is important for you to understand, because you may not be aware of what your child is feeling, but you see certain behaviors, you see certain ways that they are affected by things. And this is important. I don't know how come I keep on turning the fan off. um, this is important to be able to know, even if your child never knew who their father was, or whether he's willingly in their life or not. When you got an issue with daddy, most of the time the child has an issue with daddy. I want to make sure that I'm coming through. Okay, I want to pause for a minute and make sure that all of this that the broadcast is coming through okay, because of course I can't see all of the comments right now. Thank God that the group is growing, continuing to grow. We do filter very, very intentionally to make sure, that we have people in here who want to be in here, that it's, of course, you show up differently when you're somewhere that you want to be. Okay, so I'm just doing a quick check really quick. Okay, so you can hear me. Y'all can hear me okay. Okay, good. All right. So when you're looking at your relationships with men, you know, this relationship, I mean, the idea is daddy is the first person that you fall in love with. It's the first feeling of adoration, protection, security. These are all things that are healthy. And see, mama, just the mother wound, and I understand that there are some women who have both the mother wound and a father wound. And, it's often very easy to direct the emotions and the feelings of disgust, upset, hate, victimhood, and abandonment to the father who's not there. So I understand that you don't have to pick which one wounded you the most, or you got to be loyal to one parent because that's the parent that was there. The truth of the matter is, it is healthy, particularly in counseling, or it's going to come up, because mama for a girl teaches a girl how to identify with herself, who she is. She teaches her how to be a woman. That's not something a man can teach. He can raise a girl, but typically daddy teaches how to move in the world. Mama teaches you how to move inside of yourself. Daddy teaches you how to move in the world. And so when you have any type of experience when it relates to dad that is not a favorable one, it can affect you. For me, it broke my heart, because as I read, I was once, I was the apple of his eye. And so when they went through problems, I absolutely started to ask the question, what's wrong with, why doesn't daddy love us, or those types of things. And let me say this really quickly before I get too deep into this. It's really easy for a woman to be angry and upset, but be very careful about the things that you say about your ex, or it's complicated when it comes to your child, because they will internalize that and then make up their own story, or take on your story. So this is very important, because I know that sometimes when the father is not present, it's very easy to go into justifications of why you can't stand him and all of that. And so there was a period of time, I'm sure, where all of that happened. There's so much more I can tell you about my experience during that time, and how the divorce affected me and that type of thing. But the overall message was, I didn't think that he loved me. So here's the question that I ask, and we're going to open that up so you can ask some questions for those of you who are on Facebook. I had my father forgotten that I was daddy's girl? What happened to the man who took joy and added value by calling his child Ladybird? Where was my favorite pal? In my mind, this obviously was a case of the body snatchers. I wanted my daddy back. For years, I tiptoed around his trigger-sensitive personality to protect myself. I couldn't help it. I still loved him. In other words, my daddy was not always a cheerful guy. He was just very firm, very straightforward, very direct. And so I didn't get a whole lot of affirmation from either side. And so with my father, I started to just be, even though I loved him, I felt like I had to protect myself around him. Whereas usually, but I knew as a girl, as a daughter, that nothing, would happen to me as long as I was with him. That, of course, I knew that. I had that level of awareness. So I was asking these questions. Check this out. I said, I hated to ask him for anything, including financial support when we really needed it. One harsh tone from my father would resonate through my being and make me nervous, teary, and just unsettled. So I developed the habit of not asking. How many of you can relate to your badge of honor that, well, I didn't have to ask anybody for anything? Because somewhere we get the message that if we can take care of ourselves, if we can do what we need to do for ourselves, that somehow we've been successful in our womanhood. But it is the beginning of an unhealthy relationship with the masculine, even if the masculine is inside of you. And how you show up in the world in terms of being able to really ask for your needs to be met. So for the most part, I said he was absent. I didn't receive counsel from him about dating and courtship, and missed hearing compliments and encouragement from a father like, you look pretty. I like your hair. Or, baby, I like your hair like that. You can do it. Don't give up. And I'll pause here to say, because I didn't write about this part, but the most my father would always tell me was, baby, you get your education. Because can't nobody take away your education. He was really big on that. And in many ways, there's part of me that may have even rebelled against that later on. And I can tell you about that later. Because sometimes we are quietly still rebelling to things that we didn't receive. And so there's certain things that you think you can't do, but even your relationship with love, sex, and money, it can show up here in terms of how you move out into the world. Sometimes it can be on the extreme of overcompensation and undercompensation. And it depends. If you felt undercompensated, then you will move out into the work always trying to overcompensate with the intention to be good, do good, be acknowledged. So you start to get a lot of your validation sometimes out there. And so I'm talking to you about this on Father's Day. Let me just tell you again, let me pause and say, I'm not coming in here just to talk about the problem. I can stand before you and tell you that because of the work that I did and that I will offer to you to be able to do, I was able to experience a complete and total atonement with my father later on in life. And I'm grateful that I was able to see that, because that's when I knew, as Jay-Z says, this spiritual shit really work, huh? Because it really does work. And it really did transform my relationship with both parents, but particularly with my father. And let me tell you why. I'm going to skip forward a little bit, because my father, over the years, my father made it clear he wouldn't revisit old events that had wounded me. In other words, when I did finally get the courage to tell him how I felt, he was not receptive to it. In other words, so in my childhood mind, I didn't feel heard. Now I'm saying key things here so that you can spot some of this, because this is some of the stuff that you say to your beloved when they disappoint you. You think it's your beloved, you think that it's your performance out in the world, but truly a lot of times we are still reacting to the original wound. So I imagine the process, and I skipped ahead. Little did I know the answers were beyond him in any way. He had refused. So I lived with years of my father refusing to go there, if you will, with me, to acknowledge that he hurt me, if you will. And and I don't want to say he hurt me, because of course as we got on the other side, it was never his intention to hurt me. But of course, a lot of times our parents just don't have the tools and the skills to be able to explain to us in the depths of with emotional intelligence, if you get an explanation at all. And so I imagined the process. Let me record. I imagined the process in my mind's eye, journaling, speaking out loud, affirming and praying. He knew nothing of all of this, and I trusted the process. It wasn't easy. The process is a process that I actually went through while in training at the Intervisions Institute for Spiritual Development. And so a lot of times that's why I take issue with coaches who are jumping out here and jumping into issues that they have not had training, substantive training. And so they open up the wound not knowing how to close it back up. That's important. And that does require skill. So a lot of people, in terms of the coaching industry, they see you out here doing, or you just feel inspired and you say you want to help women, but you got to do your work. And one of the things that Iyanla taught us is, don't go out there trying to tell people to do work that you have not done, that you have not mastered. And so, long story short, it was a significant part of the year of my studies and on my road to coaching. In fact, it was my first experience actually healing a relationship, like literally seeing it, feeling it, walking through it with no attachment to the person doing anything. That's really key. With no attachment to the person doing anything. I'm gonna read this and then I'm just gonna talk to you a little bit more from skills, modalities, and my heart. The greatest gift I gave myself was surrendering expectations. I loved my father and I loved myself. At the same time, I knew that everything I ever need, I could have in spirit. Nothing was being withheld from me. Nothing was being withheld from consciousness. In my meditations, I could see my father in the little boy who had been hurt, rejected, but yet never had the opportunity to heal. So let me tell you what happened. Fast forward the tape. It's kind of juicy. I got robbed one year. I was living in Washington, D.C. on the South Side. And I got out of my car late one night after having an argument with a boyfriend. And you know how you pick up and you leave and you're out of here. And at that time, I was still refining my fight or flight response, another cue and a key for brokenhearted grown women, but really who have the heart of still daddy's little girl. And so this night I got out of my car and I was robbed, and it was traumatizing. I was cut. I still have a little bit of the cut here. And I had never experienced it, and I never walked in fear. After all, I'm a woman that had done martial arts training. I have done security in the Nation of Islam. I had done all of that, and so uh, so I never really walked and worried about where I was stepping. I always watched my surroundings. I always had an exit plan. So not only that, there was a part of my ego that was bruised. And so I remember sitting in at home healing. And I'd gone to the emergency room, and my father called, and he said, "Don't you know that I'm always here for you?" Because I don't remember if I called him right away. And on the inside, because I'm still so vulnerable, so in shock, really post-traumatic shock, I wanted to say, no, I don't believe that. But the little girl's like, yeah. Of course I wasn't smiling. And that began this new relationship. But I did muster up the strength to say I felt guilty, because I'm a metaphysician. And this is another thing. A lot of times people who will use the law of attraction will use it carelessly and say some of the darndest things. And so one of the things that someone said to me, an elder said to me, "How did you create this experience in your life?" Now, it's a valid question for a later time, but never. This is another nugget for you people who are going and getting internet certifications. It was a valid question, but not at that time. Okay. I have seen, of course, I digress for a moment. I've seen coaches say things like to women who've been raped, in that way. And so misusing the application of the spiritual law, or bad timing, or poor discernment, whatever you want to call it. Later on, my father and I started to talk every week at the same time. And I mean, not short conversations. And if I missed a call, he was calling me, and he was, hey, and my father called me by my middle name. And so he said, "Hey, niece, how you doing?" And of course, I'm excited because maybe I just overslept or something. But he was looking for me. So it was filling and removing all of the doubt that I had in my mind about his love for me. And now we had a moment even earlier, before I started my studies, where he had explained to me from his perspective why he didn't fully show up. Long story short, it became a love affair. My father even went through certain things, and I was able to be there, right there for him. And he clung to me, and I had the experience of that connection that I probably had ever since I was a little girl. So I want to say to those of you who are in despair, or triggered, or still walking wounded, this is important, because it will show up in how you talk to men, how you respond to men, how you are able to coexist with men, especially if you didn't grow up with brothers, or you still don't have a full explanation, or you never knew who your father was or is. And you literally can do this work on yourself that I did, and see the shift in the quality of the men that you attract in your life. It can also shape how you are able to relate to your pleasure. We're talking about pleasure. Let's start with purpose, because I was becoming more and more aware of my purpose. But there was even a growth period where I had to look at, why was I hesitating? Why wasn't I sure of myself? Why was I had all of this inside of me that I knew needed to go to an outlet, but there was something. This is another reason why money gurus oftentimes they know, and they get the sales training and they know how to make the dollar. It's like professional athletes who make the money, but yet inside there's still that place inside of them, that imprint in the brain, in the emotion, in the spirit that has never been addressed. And so with money or without money, if you're going to show up as the same person, sometimes when have money, you are absolutely more reckless, right? Yes, you have more options. Yes, you can get through it. But it really depends on who's around you, who's in your tribe. I also want to confess, if you come from a line of a lot of divorced women, bitter women, women who run down men, it's really easy to get in the chorus of the negaholics. And, I used to say to one of my elders once, I said this to one of my elders, and I wasn't being disrespectful, no different than any young person who will challenge us and call us on our BS. And I used to hear the elders talk about how these ain't no good, and you can't trust them. And honey, you better do this with them. And one day it was like, now I'm grown now, of course, but I still am respectful. And I was like, if you hate men that much, why aren't you with a woman? They looked at me. They looked at me. Well, now, I ain't say all that, of course. I wanted to challenge the conversation. I wanted to push back on this thing that causes us to get into these courts and not be the one that holds the line for something different. And as a result, mind you, I had already been married. Okay. I had been, now by the time I'm doing this work, by the time I started doing this work, I was married, and I was divorced by then. So I could look back and see the breakdown even in my marriage, because I really didn't have the knowledge. I had the wound, I had the unmet desire. In many ways, because I got married at 19 years old, which I talk about in this book. And at 19 years old, to a degree, I was still looking for daddy. And I attracted exactly that. Someone who would take care of me, who would be safety for me. I attracted exactly that. So that means that I was a masterful manifester. Hey, if I could manifest that in my wounded consciousness, then what could I manifest when I'm healed? And that's my question to you. If you can look at what you have manifested in your woundedness and what you've been able to maintain, hide, and cover up, in the energy that it takes to maintain, hide, and cover up, and overachieve or underachieve, overcompensate or be undercompensated. Whatever your case, however your nerdism shows up in your love, sex, or money, if you can do that in survival mode, what can happen if you are healed in that area? And that is what I want to offer to you all today, to come work with me. If you're interested, you can send me simply an inbox, because I already have the process created, and we can do a 2-day workshop where you would actually get some real skills, or we would look at the specific issues and the details around your experience And then we will begin to reframe, and recreate in a way that you can use over and over again. And it's so in a process, much like the process that I have experienced over the years, because it has not just been one, it has been a series of modalities that I've been able to acquire, and some experiential data that I have around being able to shift that. Because what can happen is, and if you're asking the question, well, what if my dad is dead? Or, what if he's no longer here? You can still do this work, because no matter what the relationship is, when your mother, your father is not here, the genetics is there, the memory is there, the reference point is there. And so you can still do this work. And those of you, of course, who are in the rites of passage process, you get a chance to do and dive into this work in a way that this particular offer that I'm making to those who aren't in the rites of passage process, or who, that they'll get a piece of it. You get a full month of me to be able to dig in and understand this in another way, as it applies to your feminine and as it applies to your ability to create. And so those of you who I'm speaking to, this is a way for you to get the support you need. And we would do a group process. And of course, when you respond to me today, I'm going to make you an offer that you can't refuse, a special offer for those of you who are ready to do this work. But let me tell you the value. So I definitely had other relationships after this period of time. And I noticed that, and this is for you spiritualists as well, because now I had skills. And there's a tendency sometimes for those of us who are very self-aware to overcorrect. And I knew about my fight or flight muscle. So I got into another relationship where I stayed too long. But this time it wasn't the daddy issue. And I want you to be able to hear that, because you got to know which wound is speaking, which wound is showing up at different times, because the treatment is different. The treatment is different. The treatment is different. When we start talking about these kinds of issues, there is no one size fit all. Now, let me tell you about the love story part on the healthy side, for those of you who love your daddy just like I loved mine. If your daddy's no longer here, there's a couple things. One, you do not have to take on your mother's issues with your father. That's not your business. Their marriage is none of your business. Your relationship with him is your business. What he did to your mother, unless it was abuse and human trafficking, theft, or sometimes drugs, but even drugs, you're not in your right mind, that part is none of your business. The second thing for your father is, you get to be in relationship at your level of comfort. You don't have to jump back in to try to make up for old times. But it's important for you not to punish the man or the men in your life for what you didn't have, or to walk around talking about, well, I got daddy issues. I got daddy issues, because your man is not responsible for healing that. You are responsible for healing that. Thirdly, you can create a new relationship. Well, let me say this. You can create a new relationship without really ever having to say anything. a lot of times as women, we want to go get in the face of the person that hurt us, and we don't think that we are alchemical crystals beings that you can do the work and start to shift the generational pattern in your family with this whole thing, because now you can communicate to your own children. You can, because they'll be parents one day. You know, I have seen this pattern alive. Everyone, my cousins are in here, and I'm sure they'll tell you, but all of us ever had literally, all of us probably live with a degree of rejection and abandonment issues, because it seemed like a domino effect. I think my father and mother was the first, and then his brother and his wife was next, and then another brother and that wife was. It was like the pattern was alive. And when I grew up, they would say something about them Taylor men. So not only am I questioning who I am in terms of love, I also have a community of people who are putting a scarlet letter on being a Taylor. Now imagine how those messages affect the child that's listening. And so you can recreate that, right? And even though I have seen it, I also have seen, for instance, my niece has lived through this, and I have been in her ear, offering explanations, also being able to really coach my sister through my story and explain to her, make sure you say this, make sure you do that. And I've seen the wound not live longer than the lifespan oftentimes of even the person, because the generation before my sister carried those things, and that's how it shaped their parenting. And so and then finally, this is the final thing: you have a right to celebrate your father. I still celebrate my father, whether he's living or whether he is dead. So even if you're working on the relationship, if your relationship status with your dad it's complicated, you can still celebrate the fact that you had a father, you know, that you got here. If it's at the lowest level of just he totally abandoned, never came back, he played the role to get you here. If it's at the next level, he was in your life for a short period of time, or he died and early in your life, you still can celebrate the time you had and try to learn more about not only him, but where he came from. That will tell you a lot. The next thing is you have the right, even when you have spent most of your life with your dad, to a degree. I till second grade, I spent with my father, and of course I could always put my hands on him, if you will, even though he did little things like not show up, which I know that is a big issue for women who are raising children, because oftentimes you are unhealed. So when you see your child broken down because daddy said he was coming to pick them up and he doesn't show up, that you put your foot down. And so I seen my mother go through all of those emotions, the anger, the rage at me being disappointed. Listen, I would have full-blown asthma attacks from the grief of my father saying he was coming to pick me up and didn't. And for many years into my relationships with men, I would break up with a boyfriend if he didn't do what he said he was going to do. And for many years as a young chap, I was proud of that, because I was holding the boundaries the way that I knew how. So this is another reason why we have to be really patient with our girls, because if you haven't sat down and been able to explain to them the depths of their own psychological development, then they don't know and I didn't know. And so later on, of course, I was able to relax and chill out around that. But it took me some time not to be reacting like the little girl in the window at the door. And there was a time even on the other side of ministry where I would tell this story and tear up, because my father just lived so much in my heart, to the point sometimes it bothered my mother. If you're that mother, you have work to do, because it bothered me that it bothered my mother of how much I love. I mean, I'm going to close out with this really quickly. My grandmother said to me, even before she died, she said, "Whoo," she said, "Oh, Niecy, I just hate that you love that man. That's my son." She said, "I hate that you love him so much because it hurts you so deep. I just wish you would just let him go." And I don't know what it was, but I said, "Granny, I can't do that." And later on, now this is where I get emotional, not from the hurt, but from the grace and from the joy of freedom. I said to my grandmother, I can see myself walking down the long staircase, and I said to my grandmother, I said, "Granny, I can't do that." I didn't know that that would be my ministry, that would be the beginning of my ministry. Because when I got free, the reason why I was assigned to love my father. I was assigned to him. I was his gift. And that is the problem with some of us women. We see the man as the prize and not us as the prize. And I shifted and I saw myself as his gift, because I knew I did this work. And when you start to see your love as the gift. Now, I had boundaries. I had found my voice with my father. He didn't talk to me the same way he did when I would get all crushed. It was a different level of respect. And my dad did keep his word. You normally could set your clock by my father's word. If he said he was going to do something, typically he would do it. So I knew that he wasn't in his normal when he had displayed certain behaviors. Now, none of this excuses or makes an excuse depending on the degrees of your story. What I want to share with you is that you can apply it. You can heal your daddy love story and apply it to the love stories that you want to create in your life, for yourself, in love, in your ability and availability to vulnerability in sex, and to your own creative power and demonstration in the world with money. And so if you are interested in working with me, I'm going to do a very special offer and share it in about 2 weeks, which would give you a chance to get in position and get ready far enough out from Father's Day so that we can go in from a neutral place of emotion, of thought, and actually do this just a 2-day online workshop where we'll be face-to-face in group, and we're going to work through modalities, and then I'll be able to follow up with you a second time, and then you will be able to see the fruits of the work that you've done. I guarantee that you will be able to see the shift in your world and in your relationships and even in your manifestation. So if you are there any questions here today? If you put any questions in this chat, if you don't drop them in right now, then I can come back and answer them. I'll come back to the thread later on today to answer them. Any questions? Any comments? Any thoughts? Anything? Thank you for all of you who said hello as you came in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Now I'm gonna get on up out of here. I did keep it under. Listen, I love you, and there is nothing you can do about it. I hope that this was useful to some of you. And the work, however, requires a more sacred container than this space that we're in the public, to go in a little deeper so that we can interact. Ciao, and have a wonderful day, everyone.